You're immersed in the battle. It's coming down to that moment, that action point. And then something happens in the game where, what do we do? What do the rules say? We're not really sure how to proceed. That's what we're going to focus on. That's what we're going to explore in this vlog. Now, playing a war game for me, certainly the social aspects. I want to roll some dice. I want to have some fun. Sitting down with you at the table, I want to create some memories. I want to create something interesting on the table. So this idea of immersion is important. I strive for miniatures. I strive for terrain. I strive for battlefield effects. I strive for appropriate, if it's Battletech, 80s background type music, right? To create that moment. And in that, I find that the most important thing is to keep the game going, to keep having fun, right? You sit down to play a game, you're pulled in, you're immersed in it, then a couple of hours go by and you don't even realize it. I don't want to break that immersion. I don't want to have it bogged down into tons of rules and having to look stuff up, because that pulls you out of the game, especially if it's that pivotal moment where the tension, and I say tension in a good way, right? That tension has been building. This is that magic moment. You're almost like, I can't even roll the dice. I just can't do it. To experience that moment in wargaming is so much fun. So in terms of the rules, and this is true for every wargaming system, but we're going to look at an example in Battletech that happened where we were kind of exploring in a previous vlog some Battletech combined arms ideas, and I remembered when this happened on the table, and it was an interesting question, kind of leading into this vlog. One thing flows into the other. So you can explore that vlog posted up to the Battletech playlist yesterday. The rules. I don't say memorize the rules for a wargaming system. Some are easier to memorize than others based on the complexity and based on how many times you play. But I believe have a working knowledge of the rules where you can understand the flow, you understand how to play the game. Absolutely, you can look something up if you forget it. I'm not saying that. But in those moments where you're really not sure how to proceed and you have to look something up, but even with that, it's still not really clear. How do we handle that? So within that framework, here's an example. I was playing Inner Sphere versus clans. This is Battletech. I had lots of infantry flooding the table, APCs, goblins, Karnovs. Karnovs are like air units to drop stuff off. Dropping off lots and lots of infantry. I've got the midfield swarmed with infantry. They're attacking the clan mechs. I'm making swarm attacks. This is where infantry enter a hex with a clan mech, and they start climbing up the mech, putting explosive charges, just all sorts of crazy stuff. And once they're on the mech, there's a couple of checks. Once they're on the mech, to get them off, you can literally like smash them off with your hands. You can literally just kind of move them around to get rid of these swarm attacks. So we're looking in the rules because checking the swarm attacks, the mech needs hands. You need to have hands and certain internals to be able to literally swat the infantry off yourself. The clans don't have it. They don't have that configuration. These mechs that I was attacking didn't have that configuration. So we're looking in the rules, and it doesn't really say, or I should say at that moment, we're in Total Warfare. We're looking Game of Armored Combat. I'm on the Battletech forum. At this point, like, we've really paused the game, and we're spending way too much time looking this up. So I frame it, what do you do? How do you handle it? Always keep the game going is, in my opinion. So if we get to a point where we're not sure of a rule or we're not sure of a course of action, my general, Fritz rule is come up with a ruling that would favor the opponent. Rule in the opponent's favor. Okay, yeah, you can do it. So you don't have hands. We can't find it. It says you need hands. But what about if you don't? So you can just certainly, your hand is a giant laser fist. You could smash yourself with it and get the infantry off. Rule in favor of your opponent. And I say that not only to keep the game going, but the tabletop glory that will be mine. I want to win that with honor and glory. I don't want to win that on a technicality or some whack win at all costs, WAAC rule. I want to win on glory alone, right? So from that perspective, okay, rule in favor. You know, there's other games where I'm shooting, I'm high explosive rounds, chain of command, I'm shooting high explosive rounds into infantry, and they're possibly in cover based on line of sight. Maybe, maybe not. Big difference with the cover, being caught out in the open versus being caught out in the open. So, okay, you know what? Take the cover. It's okay. So the first thing I would say is rule in favor of your opponent. Now, if that's not possible, or even with that where it's like, look, it could kind of go either way, we're not sure. In that moment, come up with, not a house rule, but come up with a decision based on the feel and flow of the rules. Don't just kind of make some arbitrary decision. Make a decision with your opponent, with your friend. Hey, this is how we're going to handle it for the rest of this game. So once you make a ruling together on how to handle something, that rule is binding for the rest of the game. So if I make further swarm attacks, this is what we can do. There's no gotcha. There's no hidden knowledge. This is what you do. This is how you do it. That is binding for the rest of the game. Then when the game's over, you can look up. And if you played it wrong, it doesn't matter. You finished out the game, and the rule was consistent in the flow. That's, in my opinion, the best way to handle it. The two ways that I don't like to handle it is just I want the ruling my way, even if I'm right. Even if I believe that I'm right. I should say even if I believe that I'm right, I will always defer to my opponent, however you want to handle it. Because again, the glory will all be mine. There's no sharing glory. So if I'm going to win, I'm not going to win on a technicality. I also don't like dicing it off. Some tournaments do that, or they used to do that, where if there's a rule disagreement between you and I to get the game going, you're saying, Fritz, my model is in cover. And I'm saying, no, it's not in cover. And I'm lighting you up high explosive. If you're not in cover, you're toast. And this is a pivotal point of the game because you're making your way up that hill and you thought that like one little blade of grass was going to protect yourself. Dice it off. 1 to 3, you're in cover. 4 to 6, you're not in cover. I don't like that. I don't. Is it random? Is it a possibility? Do I normally embrace the dice gods? Yes, absolutely. But the problem with that is D6ing it off only creates hard feelings. Because if I win, I'm going to be like, well, the dice decided, so that's good. And my opponent's going to be like, no, that was just random. It's the way he rolled it. It's the way I rolled it. I should get a re-roll. Well, it's like, look, you're going to get a re-roll on your re-roll on the re-roll. No one's happy with the D6. It does keep the game going. No one's happy with the D6. Give it to your opponent. Kind of side note, approaching it from a tournament perspective. There's a lot more on the line if you're playing competitively and you're playing in a tournament. Then I'll turn it over to you guys in the comments. Rules where you're not sure what happens next. How do you handle it? In tournament play, it's kind of customary to have the tournament organizer make a ruling. And that's perfectly fair. And even if you make that ruling and it's against you, even if the TO, tournament organizer, makes it against you, there can't be any hard feelings because this is a tournament, it's competitive play, and the referee, the tournament organizer, the rules expert, they're making a ruling. Even if they're wrong, even if I disagree, that rule is binding. To do that, again, tournament 2, I want the glory. To stand up there and place first, second, or third place, that's where I want to be. So if I make a ruling, if a TO makes a ruling, and I win off that, that's okay, but that could leave hard feelings. That's not like the full glory. I still prefer in a tournament setting, if it comes up with a dispute between me and my opponent, I'll give it to them. You think your unit's in cover? Absolutely. You think you got that objective contested? Absolutely. If they're going to try and get me on a gotcha moment, hopefully my tactica is good enough and strong enough and winning enough that ruling in your favor is not going to make a major difference. And if it does, so be it. I played with honor. I played with glory. And at least I went down fighting from that perspective. So turning it over to you guys, making a ruling. You come up to a rules point where you really don't know what to do next. In that moment, in the game moment. Afterwards, you can look it up. You got the internet. You got the Battletech forum. You got BGG, whatever. Call up your best buddy. Be like, what's the ruling? But in that moment of the game, how do you handle it?